We're live. Let's make sure here. Okay. Welcome to Love and Money Secrets TV. I'm your host, Dame Lillian Walker, and today we are reading Chapter 7 of Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. So let's get started. Chapter 7, The Gap. So I was sitting on my couch one day thinking about what it means to be happy. As I contemplated my utter lack of joy, I thought about how most people who were important to me would have given me a pep talk right on the spot. I imagined it verbatim. You're so incredibly lucky. You have a wonderful family, which includes beautiful kids. You're a successful chiropractor. You lecture to thousands of people. You travel the world going to unusual places. You were featured in What the Bleep Do You Know? What the Bleep Do We Know? And many people loved your message. You even wrote a book and it is doing well. They would have hit all of the right emotional and logical notes. But to me, something wasn't right. I was at a point in my life where I was traveling from city to city every weekend doing lectures. Sometimes I was in 2 cities within 3 days. It occurred to me that I was so busy that I had no time to actually practice what I was teaching. This was an unnerving moment because I began to see that all my happiness was created from outside of me, and that the joy I experienced when I was traveling and lecturing had nothing to do with real joy. It appeared to me that I needed everyone, everything, and every place outside of me in order to feel good. This image that I was projecting to the world was dependent on external factors. And when I was not out lecturing or doing interviews or treating patients and I was home, I felt empty. Don't get me wrong. In some ways, those things outside of me were great. If you had asked anyone who saw me lecturing, deeply engrossed in working on a presentation during a flight or answering dozens of emails while in an airport or hotel lounge, such an observer would have said that I appeared to be pretty happy. The sad truth is, if you had asked me at one of those moments, I would have probably responded in much the same way. Yes, things are great. I'm doing well. I'm a lucky guy. But if you had caught me in a quiet moment when all those other stimuli weren't bombarding me, I would have responded in a completely different manner. Something's not right. I feel unsettled. Everything feels like the same old, same old. Something is missing. On the day I recognized the core reason for my unhappiness, I also realized that I needed the external world to remember who I was. My identity, my identity had become the people I talked to, the cities I visited, the things I did while I was traveling, and the experiences I needed in order to reaffirm myself as this person called Joe Dispenza. And when I wasn't around anyone who could help me recall this personality that the world might know as me, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. So, in fact, I saw that all of my perceived happiness was really just a reaction to stimuli in the external world that made me feel certain ways. And then I understood that I was totally addicted to my environment and I was dependent on external cues to reinforce my emotional addiction. What a moment for me. I had heard a million times that happiness comes from within, but it never hit me like this before. As I sat on the couch in my house that day, I looked out the window and an image came to me. I envisioned my two hands, one above the other, separated by a gap. How we appear, the identity I projected to the outer environment, who I want you to think I am, the facade, ideal for the world, who we really are, how I feel, who I really am, who I am on the inside, ideal for self. Okay, figure 7a, the gap between who we really are and how we appear. The top hand represented how I appeared on the outside, and the bottom was how I knew myself to be on the inside. In my self reflection, it dawned on me that we human beings live in a duality as two separate entities, how we appear and who we really are. How we appear is the image or the facade that we project to the world. That self is everything we do in order to show up looking a certain way and to present to others a consistent exterior reality. This first aspect of the self is a veneer of how we want everyone to see us, how we really are. Represented by that bottom hand is how we feel, especially when we're not distracted by the external environment. It is our familiar emotions when we are not preoccupied by life. It is what we hide about ourselves. When we memorize addictive emotional states such as guilt, shame, anger, fear, judgment, depression, self importance, or hatred, we develop a gap between the way we appear and the way we really are. The former is how we want other people to see us. The latter is our state of being when we are not interacting with all the different experiences, diverse things, and assorted people at various times and places in our lives. If we sit long enough without doing anything, we begin to feel something. That something is who we really are. The layers of emotion we memorize that create the gap: unworthiness, anger, fear, shame, self doubt, guilt, past experiences with refractory period. So, figure 7b in your books, the size of the gap varies from person to person. Who we really are, how we appear, are separated by the feelings we memorize throughout different points in our lives based on past experiences. The bigger the gap, the greater the addiction to the emotions we memorize. So layer by layer, we wear various emotions which form our identity. In order to remember who we think we are, we have to recreate the same experiences to reaffirm our personality and the corresponding emotions. As an identity, we become attached to our external world by identifying with everyone and everything in order to remind us of how we want to project ourselves to the world. So, how we appear becomes the facade of the personality, which relies on the external world to remember who it is as a somebody. Its identity is completely attached to the environment. The personality does everything it can to hide how it really feels or to make that feeling of emptiness go away. I own these cars. I know these people. I've been to these places. I can do these things. I've had these experiences. I work for this company. I am successful. It is who we think we are in relation to everything around us. But that is different from who we are, how we feel without the stimulation of our outer reality. Feelings of shame and anger about a failed marriage, fear of death and uncertainty about the afterlife, related to the loss of a loved one or even a pet, a sense of inadequacy due to a parent's insistence on perfectionism and achievement at all costs, a sense of stifled entitlement from having grown up in a circumstance barely above poverty, a preoccupation with thoughts of not having the right body type in order to look a certain way to the world. These kinds of feelings are what we want to conceal. Now, this is who we truly are, the real self hiding behind the image we are projecting. We can't face exposing that self to the world, so we pretend to be somebody else. We create a set of memorized automatic programs that work to cover the vulnerable parts of us. So essentially, we lie about who we are because we know that societal mores do not have room for that person. That is the nobody. That is the person whom we doubt. That is the person whom we doubt others will like and accept, particularly when we are younger and are forming our identity. We are more likely to engage in this kind of masquerade. We see young people trying on identities like trying on clothes. And in truth, what teens wear is often a reflection of who they want to be more than it reflects who they really are. Ask any mental health professional who specializes in working with young people, and she will tell you that one word defines what it is like to be an adolescent: insecurity. As a result, teens and preteens seek comfort and conformity and in numbers. So rather than let the world know what you were really like, adopt and adapt, because everyone knows what happens to those who are perceived to be different. The world is complex and scary, but makes it less frightening and much simpler by lumping everyone into groups. Pick your group, pick your poison. Eventually, that identity fits. You grow into it, or at least that's what you tell yourself. Along with the insecurity comes a great deal of self consciousness. Questions abound. Is this who I really am? Is this who I really want to be? But it's so much easier to ignore those questions than to answer them. Life experiences define our identity. Staying busy keeps unwanted emotions at bay. So before we move on to that section, talking about life experiences defining our identity and staying busy keeps unwanted emotions at bay. That really hits home for me because I know that much of my adult life and much of in my first marriage, I was a workaholic, and I spent a lot of my time avoiding certain emotions and having to think about certain things because I was too preoccupied with not just being a mom and a wife, but also juggling my work. And basically, I had 25, 30 kids at work that I had to manage in addition to myself. And so I had my brokers and agents and lenders and loan coordinators and transaction coordinators, assistants, yada, yada, that I had all under my roof at work. And then all the clients that we had on top of that. And so that's a lot of energy, a lot of interaction with a lot of other human beings, not to mention all the other, there were about 28 to 35 affiliate support providers, things like everything from contractors to home insurance agents to, you name it, title insurance agents. I mean, the list was on escrow agents. It was a long laundry list of service providers that were required in order for me to close any one transaction. So you have all those salespeople also soliciting you, and you develop these relationships with them. So it's a large number of people that you're dealing with on a day in, day out basis, basically 6 days a week. Because I did come to a point where I did actually make sure that instead of working 7 days a week, I got down to 6 days a week, just to keep things in balance. And when you're that entrenched and you're that busy, where you are sleeping maybe 4 or 5, if you're lucky, 6 hours a day, and your whole identity is you're wearing 2, 3 hats at the same time. And that is actually something that I would actually verbiage it that way. I languaged it that way with not only my agents, but even with people that I would talk to on the phone. I'm calling you if I was talking to somebody, in Little League that maybe needed my services. It's like, okay, I'm calling you with my mom hat on, or now I'm going to put my lender hat on, or I'm going to put my broker hat on, talk to you from a professional standpoint. You mentioned that you needed yada, 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 yada. I might be able to help you with this. So you're so busy and it's consuming so much of your attention and your awareness that you have very little time to really be in a state of awareness where you're just getting in touch with your heart and your actual soul so that you can center yourself. And I've been doing meditations for over 2 decades. And yes, I would, before I would go to sleep, I still, even in the throes of all that chaotic busyness, where I was up very early in the morning and would go to sleep very late, very early in the morning, really, too, because I'd go to sleep at 1 or 2 in the morning and get up at 5:30 in the morning. I would still meditate. It may have not been for an hour and a half or two, but I did meditate. I remember I would go into my walk-in closet and I would close the door. I would turn on the light in there and I would sit down, lotus style on the floor. And I would that would be my quiet time by myself, isolated from the entire household in my master bedroom. And that's when I would sit down and take that time to just quiet my mind and just kind of get recentered. And things were revealed to me. And then in the morning, after I would drop off my kids to work, after I would drop off my kids to their schools, because there's 3 different schools, then I would go to the beach because it was only 4 minutes away, and I would spend 30 minutes at the beach before I did anything else. And then it's the most serene, life-giving thing that I could do for myself. Just take those 30 minutes. Sometimes it was only 15 minutes. Every now and then I felt compelled to take a whole hour, but I would center myself doing that. But I will say that I did use my work and my busyness of juggling everything as a way of having to not deal with certain unpleasant emotions that I had. And I'm sure that my ex probably did the same thing too. We were both guilty. I can speak for myself that I was definitely very guilty of that. He does talk about here some other things that I wanted to touch upon, because I think that these are things that I think you all probably are relating to. And I know that there's at least one person that this is ringing a bell with. He talked about how he recognized that he had an utter lack of joy, even though from the exterior, everybody looking at him, he appeared to be very happy. And he had all the reasons to be happy. His career was going well. He had a beautiful family, beautiful children. He was a successful chiropractor. He was traveling all over the world, going to unusual places. He has celebrity because he's been in this movie, several movies at this point. And he recognized that he had that emotional addiction to the busyness that was inherent to living that particular lifestyle, and that he was outwardly focused in order to feel inwardly balanced and happy. But the reality was he wasn't feeling inwardly happy and balanced, because it sounds like life was kind of getting a little out of his reach, because he was so busy traveling and lecturing and putting these things together that he was having little time to do what he was actually teaching others to do. I've been there. So, and he said, this was a nerving moment because I began to see that all my happiness was created from outside of me. He was only happy because he was doing all of those things, and yet those same things were also causing him unhappiness and an utter lack of joy. And the joy I experienced when I was traveling and lecturing had nothing to do with real joy. It appeared to me that I needed everyone and everything and every place outside of me in order to feel good. So he was feeling good so long as he was having everyone, everything, and every place. And it was an image that he was projecting to the world, which was dependent on those external factors rather than having it come from the well within inside of him. And when I was not out lecturing or doing interviews or treating patients and I was home, I felt empty. So he was not at peace being in a quiet place just with himself, because the things that he thought were bringing him joy were just those externals. So to be at home and to be quiet, to be home and to be like just with his family or his kids, he felt empty. So he said, don't get me wrong, in some ways, those things outside of me were great, which I'm sure they were and still continue to be. If you asked anyone who saw me lecturing, deeply engrossed in working on a presentation during flight or answering dozens of emails, because there's a little bit of an adrenaline rush when you have all these people who are soliciting your advice. They have questions, they have comments, they have concerns, they want your help. If they want your help, it's an acknowledgement of your expertise, which in a subtle sort of way is almost can be, depending on your frame of mind, can be an ego stroke. So he said, answering dozens of emails while in an airport or hotel lounge, such an observer would have said that I appeared to be pretty happy. The sad truth is that if you had asked me at one of those moments, I probably would have responded in much the same way here. He says, yes, things are great. I'm doing well. I'm a lucky guy, which everybody would agree with him. He was and is. But if you had caught me in a quiet moment when all those other stimuli weren't bombarding me, I would have responded in a completely different manner. Something's not right. Pause button. What was not right was that he didn't have the adrenaline running. He didn't have the endorphins running through his bloodstream because now he's in a state of rest. And he wasn't okay. For him, being in that state of rest was not familiar to him. So he was addicted to that hustle and bustle, run, people, places, things, people, places, things, people, places, things, people, places, things, which is why he felt unsettled when he just had to be still and be in a place of quiet. It says everything feels like the same old, something's missing. Because at some point when you have that compulsion to keep producing, answering the beck and call wherever it's coming from with people, places, and things, all of a sudden you realize this is kind of it can feel like a shallower plane of existence because it's kind of a more superficial thing because you haven't really tended to the deeper longings of your heart. So on the day I recognized the core reason for my unhappiness, that's a big aha. So if there's anyone that's watching this right now, specifically you who are looking into this camera right now, I'm looking at you through my camera. If there is something that is just not settling right, that you know inherently in your heart and soul that you were not happy, even though from the outside the world would look at you and say, wow, but you have it all. You have money, you have time, you live in a wonderful country, you have a wonderful lifestyle, yada, yada, yada. But you're still empty. I got to tell you, one of the things that I found, I'm going to share a little bit of some of my experience over the last 10 years. As some of you know, I owned a mortgage bank, and during the two biggest enterprises that I had was the mortgage bank, which I started just as a party of one. It was just originally just me, and then I grew that from a mortgage brokerage to I was a mortgage broker. I turned it into a mortgage brokerage, and then turned that into a mortgage bank. And then I also I had some import-export businesses along the side, but separate from that, then I also I bought an international real estate franchise that was originally an Exit Realty, which their headquarters is in Mississauga in Toronto, Canada. And so, long story short, I remember the transition up until I bought that real estate franchise. The businesses that I had before, I pretty much identified myself as, from one standpoint, I identified as a lender, as a mortgage banker, and as an entrepreneur, because I did have several other businesses. But I was primarily, I was a businesswoman. And I've always had kind of a parallel, very kind of more of on the quiet side, the whole healing thing that I would do with a more of a private group, but never anything in public. And that started ever since, I'd say probably since before high school, and went through to, that's why when I went to college, I actually was pre-med biological sciences and so forth. And when I graduated from high school, I graduated simultaneously as a paramedic. I got my emergency medical technician certification and was able to put myself through college and work for a private ambulance company, was able to work the Olympics, did a lot of really cool things as a result of the medical background that I had. Because at the time I was still on the path of thinking I wanted to be a doctor. And so, long story short, one of the things that I noticed when I bought the real estate franchise, I remember there was a point in time where the primary business that I had was no longer the mortgage bank. It was the real estate brokerage. And it caught me by surprise because the mindset of a mortgage banker is much different than the mindset of a real estate broker. And although, yes, you're dealing with investors on both ends, you're still having people qualified for the financing and so forth, the mindset is clearly different. And I remember there being a shift in my identity that was related to that. And with that same recognition, I realized I'm more than that job title, because, to my mother, I'm her daughter. To my kids, I'm their mother. To my spouse, I'm their wife. To my friends, I'm their friend. To the other owner, broker owners in the area, I'm a colleague. So there's all these labels. And at about the same time, I kind of always had a certain notion of this, but all of a sudden it became something that was more in my awareness about how, as human beings, society likes to put labels on everybody for everything. It could be age, it could be your profession, it could be your religion, it could be where you went to school. People want to know these certain things so that they can, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but what I had noticed was, it's like, okay, I see that you went to this university. That means that you come from this economic social class and you have this amount of education. So I can put you in this type of box because you were from that group of people. And if you're this certain age, which I was always reaching to be an older age, because since I traditionally always looked much younger than what I actually was, I always wanted to be perceived as being 10 years older, just because it infers more experience and more wisdom. And so the whole age thing, the whole education thing, even though I was always proud, I know that, your schooling, and I never had shame about any of that, but it kind of bothered me that people are always trying to define you by those things. If they don't know those things about you, they would maybe treat you one way, and then once they realize, it's like, oh, something as simple as, like, people would come to I had a nice home, so a salesperson would come to my home. Either they're trying to sell, security, or they're trying to sell whatever, whatever kind of home service. And they oftentimes would say, they would ask, could you please have the owner of the home come to the door? And I said, I'm the owner of the home. He's like, would you please ask your mother to come to the door? I'm like, I am the mother of this home. I own this home. I pay the mortgage. And so that would bother me, that, there's a certain paradigm of what you need to look like, to either be a mom or a homeowner or all these things. So one of the things that the way I've been wired was that whoever it is that I'm talking to, I don't identify them by age. I don't know why I've always thought this, but I always think whoever it is that I'm talking to, they could be 80, 90 years old, or they could be, younger than me. And somehow inside myself, the way I feel like everybody is the same age as I am. And it's not until people started pointing out to me, it's like, oh no, that person's much older than you, or oh no, that person's younger than you. I'm like, really? Do you think so? And I always thought, oh, I never noticed. I never paid attention to that, because I was really relating soul to soul. But not everybody does that. But if you start looking at people and perceiving people more from the perspective of not what their age is, because if you approach somebody and you think, okay, this person is X age, so they should be behaving a certain way because people that are 30 behave this way, as opposed to somebody who's 20, or somebody who's 40, or somebody who's 50 or 60, or whatever their age is. And as I got older, I noticed that this thing, for example, the age label, became more pronounced. And at the same time, as I'm hearing certain people language things about older people who are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, I knew so many people who were exceptions of that. For example, one of my dear late mentors who has now passed away, he was almost 90 when he passed, it was the late Bill Nasby, world famous Bill Nasby. They also called him the bald eagle. And Bill, up until a few years before he passed, was still jumping out of airplanes. I think he was 44 or 45 years old before he started flying planes, and then started jumping out of planes for fun, skydiving, along with his wonderful wife, who was 20 years his junior. And so Bill did all sorts of physical things that there were guys who were 40 years old who couldn't keep up and do what he did. And him and his wife, Raina, both Canadians, we would be at an Exit Realty convention, and Bill and Raina would be dancing for hours on the dance floor. And there were people who were 30, 40 years younger than them who could not keep up with the stamina and the vigor and the joie de vivre that they had. They had an incredible zest for life. So all of that to say that what Dr. Joe is talking about here has to do with some of those paradigms of labeling, and it also has to do with being centered in your inner being. Your inner being, he talks about in the meditations, you want to be no one, nobody, no thing, nowhere, no place, in no time. So you are in a place of nothingness. You're in the void. When you're in the void during the middle of a meditation, you're not identifying with the physical sensation of your body. So you become no one, nobody. You're no thing, no place, nowhere, in no time. You're actually in that void, and all you are is a pure state of consciousness. Now, that being said, what I myself have experienced is that the more you decide to bring yourself into that place where you go into the void every day in meditation, doesn't matter whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day, an hour and a half at a sitting, doesn't matter. I really, if I were coaching you one-on-one, I would say, make sure you do it every morning and every night, bookends. First thing, when you first wake up, when your brain is still in theta state, go into the void. Before you go to sleep, your brain is already moving towards going into a theta state. Before you go to sleep, the best thing that you can do is get yourself into that theta state, go into the void, put in your order of what it is that you want, so that it's the last thing that you seal your records with before you go into sleep, because then now you've planted the seed and it's going to grow and you're going to be able to manifest it. And it's a positive input. You're going into that place where you are one with the one and you become the one. And that's how you quantum create. That particular mechanistic doing, there's something about it calibrating your beingness. And for some unexplainable reason, it brings you, in my opinion, an unexpected sense of joy. What I have found is that now I am happy oftentimes for no apparent reason. Even when there are things that the world would say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we're in the last days, things are horrible, look at this horrible thing happened, or look at, all these exterior circumstances. These are all the reasons why to be anxious or worried or nervous or fearful or upset or freaked out or whatever. I find myself not being in those places because of the practice that I've had. Because, well, for one thing, I have my heart and my brain and my mind are coherent. They're centered. They've been every day. Every time you meditate, you calibrate those organs and you calibrate that energy. So that is tremendously helpful and tremendously beneficial. The other thing that happens too is that you also recognize that any unwanted circumstance that is before you, you actually have the ability to morph it, to change the energy. You know how to go from where whatever it is that you're witnessing, and you can take those potential waveforms of energy, and by looking at it, it turns into particles. Now you have 1 particle, 2 particle, 3 particle, 4 particle. They start to multiply, and those particles then, boom, turn into something in 3D, and you're able to. You're an alchemist, is what you're really doing. And so knowing that, oh, okay, in light of something that I don't want, I hit the pause button. It's like, it's been my mantra for the last year. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is something unwanted. Nope, I'm gonna hit the pause button rather than react, or rather than worry, freak out, what have you. No, that's what everybody else does. I'm gonna hit the pause button. I'm not gonna react. I'm going to slow down my heart rate, slow down my breath, slow down my brain waves. I'm going to get myself into theta, and I'm going to do a meditation, and I'm going to focus on what it is that I want, add an elevated emotion of love, add another elevated emotion of gratitude, and then appreciation, and then let it go, because I know that the order is in. And now I am in a place of eager anticipation, knowing that at some point, I don't know exactly when, that's the surprise, but that it is on its way. And no, I can't even have 1% doubt, because 1% doubt makes it out. So no, there's no room for doubt. That's not a loving thought towards myself, to think, oh, maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe it's not going to work. No, that's my old self. My new self is loving, knowing I put the order in. I got this. I know how to do this. I know perfectly well how to do this. This is not the first time I'm doing this. And I'm just going to continue to move forward. And now I've got a lot of cool stuff in queue that are going to start popping into my reality, because one thing after the other, at unexpected times, they start to present themselves. Okay, so let's see. The other thing I wanted to point out here, he did recognize that it was his external world, that he was hanging his happiness contingent upon his external outward, the things that he was physically doing. And the other thing, he recognized that he had that emotional addiction to those things. And okay, so we're going to move on to our next section. Okay, the layers of emotion we memorized that create the gap. We already talked about that. Let's see. And we are on page, for those of you who are reading on your books and you're following along, we are on page 152. Okay, so page 152. Life experiences define our identity. Staying busy keeps unwanted emotions at bay. So all of us have been emotionally scarred from traumatic or difficult experiences as young people. Early in life, we experienced defining events, the emotions of which contributed layer by layer to who we became. So let's face it, we all have been branded by emotionally charged events. Part of the human experience, I think you would agree. As we mentally review the experience repeatedly, the body began to relive the event over and over, just by thought alone. We kept the refractory period of emotion running for so long that we journeyed from a mere emotional reaction to a mood, to a temperament, and ultimately to a personality trait. So while we are young, we keep busy doing things that for a while stave off those old, deep emotions, sweeping them under the rug. It is intoxicating to make new friends, travel to unknown places, work hard and achieve a promotion, learn a new skill, or take up a new sport. We seldom suspect that many of these actions are motivated by feelings left over from certain earlier events in life. I'm going to pause real quick here, because he talks here about it's intoxicating to make new friends, travel to unknown places, work hard and achieve a promotion, learn a skill, or take up a new sport. One of the things that in the past year I was fortunate that I was able to travel quite a bit. And one of the neat blessings that are inherent of you traveling is that you don't have to be identified with any particular title, any particular whatever it is that you do for a living. Now, what was fascinating to me was, especially in Italy, for some reason, it didn't happen in other parts of the world, but in Italy per se, everybody assumed that I was a journalist because I ran around with my camera. And I was always taking pictures and always filming. And they always thought I was a journalist, and I always had to correct them. No, I'm not a journalist. No, I'm not a journalist. One of the things that I had set forth when I was out traveling also last year is I didn't want to be identified with any kind of a label as to, being a writer or being a radio show host or, a YouTuber or any of the traditional memes, if you will, that are classically put upon folks. I just wanted to be me, independent of anything else, just be me. But people, of course, always want to figure out, I had somebody who called me a graphic artist. I said, I've never called myself a journalist. Mind you, I've always written quite a bit. I've always had a certain love for journalism, but I'm definitely not a journalist. So it was really funny to me how people really want to put you in a specific, category. They want to, in order to make sense of who you are, they need that label. And the truth of the matter is that when you travel, you can pretty much be whoever it is you want to be. You can choose to disclose and say as little or as much as you'd like, about who you are, who you have been, who you are becoming. It's all up to you. The other thing I was going to mention is that, yeah, it is intoxicating when, it's inherent when you travel, you're going to meet new people literally from all over the world. So as you're traveling, it is a cool experience to meet new personalities, new people with stories that you've never heard of before, with adventures that you've never heard of before. And he's talking here about, we seldom suspect that many of these actions are motivated by feelings left over from certain earlier events in life. Yeah, no. So I just wanted to address that one aspect. One of the things that is true is you don't have to travel in order to create a new identity for yourself. You can continue to live in the same city, the same town that you live in right now, and you could reinvent yourself. There's been plenty of people that went from being an attorney to now there's one attorney that I know, he went from becoming an attorney to he actually is a Lego sculptor and lives in New York. It's like, wow, what a leap. And his passion ever since he was a child was building Lego figures. And he absolutely had a passion for building Legos, never thought for a second that he could do it for a living. But he actually quit his job as an attorney, and now he builds large sculptures that are made out of Legos, and organizations pay him thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for these life-size, sometimes larger than life-size Lego sculptures. And so there are people from all different backgrounds, chemical toxicologist that now is an incredible artist or musician. So there isn't, the only limitations that really are present are the limitations that you put upon yourself. And you can change your profession, you can change your identity, you can change a lot more about yourself than what you think. The thing is, you have to make a choice. What do you want? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? What does that end picture, the fantasy dream life that you want? Describe it. An exercise that I'm doing actually with my BFF, my best friend who lives in Hawaii, Tammy, her and I, we have this thing where we actually started writing the story. And it's the whole purpose of this exercise is to help us manifest more specifically the different aspects that we want in our life to create an even more dreamy like life. Now, depending on where you are when you're watching this particular broadcast from wherever you are in the world, some people look at her and say, oh my gosh, you live in this exotic place. You live in Hawaii, in Hilo. A lot of people would love to move to Hilo, and many people have moved to Hilo, but she actually lives in Hilo, which is a paradise in and of itself. but that's where she was born. That's where she was raised. We met when we were at USC, when we were roommates for a few years there at SC. And the thing that she said at that time was that she would never go back to Hawaii, never go back to Hilo, because she said it was too backwards. And yet years later, she ended up going back to Hilo, and she's lived there ever since. So she would like to leave Hilo. And so everything is relative. Somebody living in New York might say, oh, I would love to move to Hilo, or somebody in Kansas. Conversely, there are people who want to move to California. I was born and raised here, and I do admit I love California. California is a beautiful state. It's a beautiful part of the United States. I'm very blessed to live in a beach community and have for most of my life. And yet there are people who are leaving California, moving to Florida, moving to other parts of the world. So it's all relative. There's no right or wrong. You get to choose what it is that you want, whatever that might be. And so that's part of this work that Dr. Joe is showing us in Becoming Supernatural, in applying these principles, that there isn't anything that's out of your reach, but you have to decide what it is that you want first. Okay, so moving on here, we're going to go on to the next section. Boy, that's far up ahead here. I don't see the bookmark. I'm sorry. If you watch the edited version of this, you won't have to wait for me to find my spot here in the book. Okay, so life experiences, define our identity. Staying busy keeps us getting tongue-tied here. Life experiences define our identity. Staying busy keeps unwanted emotions at bay. So all of us have been emotionally scarred from traumatic or difficult experiences as young people. Early in life, we experienced defining events, the emotions of which contributed layer by layer to who we became. So let's face it, we all have been branded by emotionally charged events. As we mentally reviewed the experience repeatedly, the body began to relive the event over and over, just by thought alone. We kept the refractory period of emotion running for so long that we journeyed from a mere emotional reaction to a mood, to a temperament, and ultimately to a personality trait. While we are young, we keep busy doing things that, for a while, stave off those old, deep emotions, sweeping them under the rug. And it's intoxicating to make new friends, travel to unknown places, work hard and achieve a promotion, learn a new skill, or take up a new sport. We seldomly suspect that many of these actions are motivated by feelings left over from certain earlier events in life. So when we really get busy, we go to school, then possibly college, we buy a car, we move to a new town, to a state or a country, we begin a new career, we meet new people, we get married, we buy a house, we have kids, we adopt pets, we may get divorced, we work out, we start a new relationship, we practice a skill or a hobby. We use everything that we know in the external world to define our identity and to distract us from how we really feel inside. Take close attention, pay close attention to that, and distract us from how we really feel inside. And since all of these unique experiences produce myriads of emotions, we notice that those emotions seem to take away any feelings that we are hiding. And it works for a while. So it is a successful coping mechanism for a short while. But whatever you don't address, whatever you suppress and depress, will bubble up at the most unexpected, unwanted times. Sooner or later, you have to deal with them. So don't get me wrong. We all reach greater heights from applying ourselves throughout different periods in our growing years. And in order to accomplish many things in our lifetimes, we have to push ourselves outside of our comfort zones and go beyond familiar feelings that once defined us. I am certainly aware of this dynamic in my life. Me too. But when we never overcome our limitations and continue carrying the baggage from our past, it will always catch up with us. And this usually happens starting around our mid-30s. This can vary greatly from one person to another. Midlife, a series of strategies to make buried feelings stay buried. So by our mid 30s and 40s, When the personality is complete, we have experienced much of what life has to offer. And as a result, we can pretty much anticipate the outcome of most experiences. We already know they're going to feel, we already know how they're going to feel before we engage in them because we've had several good and bad relationships and we've competed in business or settled into our career. We've suffered loss and encountered success, or we know what we like and what we dislike. We know the nuances of life. Since we can predict the likely emotions ahead of an actual experience, we determine whether we want to experience that known event before it actually occurs. Of course, all of this is happening behind the scenes of our awareness. So here is where it gets sticky because we can predict the feelings that most events will bring. We already know what will make our feelings about who we really are go away. However, when we reach midlife, nothing can completely take away that feeling of emptiness. You wake up every morning and you feel like the same person. Your environment, which you relied on so heavily to move or to remove your pain or guilt or suffering, is no longer taking away those feelings. How could it? You already know that when the emotions derived from the external world wear off, you will return to being the same leopard who hasn't changed its spots. This is the midlife crisis that most people know about. Some try really hard to make buried feelings stay buried by diving further into their external world. Did you catch that? This is the midlife crisis that most people know about. Some try really hard to make buried feelings stay buried by diving further into the external world. So what he's saying here is that people become even greater workaholics, or maybe they are, maybe they do whatever work they need to do, and then they're addicted to whatever sports, an obsession with sports, because it keeps them where it leaves them no time to have to deal with who they really are and pay attention to their inner being. They buy the new sports car, it's a thing. Others lease the boat, another thing. Some go on a long vacation, a place. Yet others join the new social club to meet new contacts, to make new friends, people. Some get plastic surgery, body. Many completely redecorate or remodel their homes, acquire things, and experience a new environment. All of these are futile efforts to do or try something new so that they can feel better or different. But emotionally, see, those are all emotion avoidance tactics. But emotionally, when the novelty wears off, they are still stuck with the same identity. They return to who they really are. That is the bottom hand. They are drawn back to the same reality they have been living for years, just to keep the feeling of who they think they are as an identity. The truth is, the more they do, the more they buy and then consume, the more noticeable the feeling of who they really are becomes. So, what he's saying here is that because you haven't taken the time to know who your true self is on the inside, you have that rub with not wanting to deal with those buried emotions, those feelings. And that rejection of those emotions keep on bubbling up, keep on bubbling up. They're emotions that haven't been digested. I think that's why Ralph Waldo Emerson said it best, to thine own self be true, that the greatest gift that you could ever have is to truly know yourself. I've recently, I'm trying to remember what writer it was who said that the greatest thing separate from love that we come to learn and experience in this realm. It's possible that this was in the Law of One, when I remember. Hopefully it'll pop into my head. I don't remember who it was who said that the greatest thing, the greatest experience that we can learn while on this earth plane, other than to embrace love, would be to master having our conscious go into the silence by our own volition, by our own choice to go into the silence. So when you decide, okay, I'm going to take time right now to just become quiet and one with myself, to quiet my ego, to quiet my brain, and I just want to be the conscious awareness of who I am. I'm just going to go into the void, into the blackness, into that space. I'm going to be in that place where I'm no one, nobody, no thing, nowhere, no place, in no time. I'm going to detach myself from the identity of who I am as this carnal individual, and I'm just going to be in that soul space. And when you do that out of you're using your own free will to be in that place of that void. That is the greatest lesson of this 3D experience that we're having, because it is in that space that everything is. You are one with everything. Everything is one with you. That is where you tap infinite source intelligence. That is where the collective consciousness of everything, everybody, every thought that ever has been thought, ever on any plane of existence, is there, and you are one with it. There is nothing that's kept from you in that dimension. And so by you going into that space, sometimes, yeah, those emotions, if you've never dealt with those emotions, that would be a time where your subconscious is going to go, okay, she's relaxed now. Let's bubble up this emotion of, maybe it's anger. Maybe the anger is due to unforgiveness towards a person, place, or thing. And if you haven't dealt with that because you keep on depressing it, you keep on suppressing it, repressing it over and over and over again because you don't want to deal with it, at some point in time, you're going to have to deal with that. If you don't, it's going to keep on, the more you push it down, the more you are going to bring on a higher likelihood of dis-ease in the body, because the body's going, well, I'm a record of all past thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And if you're not going to deal with this, well, then that energy has to go somewhere. So it can go to your liver, it can go to your kidneys, it can go to your stomach, it can go to your lungs, it can go anywhere, wherever the weakest link in your body is. It could be your heart. There's no limit. Anything inside your body is game. So rather than run the risk of having that, it's like a bullet that's ricocheting inside your body until it lands someplace and then it starts to do damage just to that organ. So it's better to go, oh, yeah, I really don't want to think about this right now, but it's bubbling up. Let me handle this now. That's the healthy way. That's the mature way. That is the more coherent, the more energetically balanced way that you can operate your own self and manage your own self. And you're going to go, okay, what is it? Oh, I'm feeling really angry. Yeah, this was a betrayal that I had in my past. This person is the person who's attached to this betrayal. And so I have to let this person, I got to let go of this person. I have to let go of the anger that I have towards this person. I have to forgive not only them, but you have to forgive yourself. Because oftentimes you may have forgiven that other person, but if you haven't forgiven yourself, then you're still attached to that person because you forgave them, but you haven't forgiven you. You haven't forgiven yourself for being a participant in that interaction. And really, that interaction was there just to teach you probably how to forgive the other person and forgive yourself so that you could learn how to manage and resolve that type of energy. That was the gift that was in that lesson. And once you're aware of that, you're like, okay, I get it. And I see the lesson that was presented there. That's why that happened. That's why I had that experience with that person. I don't have to go through that again because I get it now. So now you can retain the wisdom from that experience. Forgive them, forgive yourself, let the energy go. And now, when you think back of that betrayal, of that experience, it doesn't have that emotional charge anymore because it's like, no, I already put that behind me. And that was there to show me certain things about myself and for me to learn to forgive them, to forgive myself. And thank goodness that happened because now I'm in this place, which is a much better place than in that place. And I don't have to repeat that lesson again with a different face, with a different body. No. Check mark, done, karmic lesson done. I can continue to move and grow and expand now and be in a more joyous place because you don't have that subconscious program still going. When is she going to take care of this? When is she going to take care of this? When is she going to take care of this? When is she going to take care of this? When is she going to take care of this? Oh, she took care of this. Okay, now there's more energy available for you to do things that you want to do. So when we're trying to escape this emptiness, or when we're running from any emotion whatsoever that is painful, it is because to look at it is too uncomfortable. I'm going to pause right here because heaven knows I've been plenty guilty. I mean, they should have my picture in here. Let's just say that. Like you just put your, Lillian Walker, because heaven knows I would run from feeling any negative emotion. I was definitely, because I had been conditioned not to acknowledge and to suppress any kind of negative emotion, because whatever negative emotion wasn't a good reason for, wasn't allowed really. And I think I've talked about it before in this study. So when the feeling starts to get a bit out of control, most people turn on the TV, surf the internet, or call or text someone in a matter of moments. Or I'm going to add here another thing that people do in addition to turning on the TV, surfing the internet, doing sports, calling or texting someone, drinking, doing legal or illegal drugs. But it could be anything. You could have someone play video games as a way of escaping, reality. And we have distractions like that are there, in moderation. It's all okay. It's when you compulsively do it and you're always escaping feeling whatever feeling it is that's trying to bubble itself up to reveal itself to you so that you can deal with it and you're in avoidance. You're going, no, I don't want to deal with that. No, not now. At some point you need to say, when would now be a good time to take care of that? It's bubbling up now. Let's take care of it now, once and for all, and then let it go. And once you let it go, then it doesn't have to keep on bubbling up anymore. So in a matter of moments, we can alter our emotions so many times. We can view a sitcom or a YouTube video and laugh hysterically, then watch a football game and feel competitive, then watch the news and be angered or fearful. Okay, so I want you to take note of what he's saying here. We can view a sitcom or a YouTube video and laugh hysterically, then watch a football game, feel competitive, then watch the news and feel angered and fearful. You notice how it's jumping from one emotional frequency to another that's an extreme. It's like a ping pong that's making you feel hot, cold, angry, happy, sad, happy, competitive, happy. It's kind of like a sway. You can see how that kind of song and dance within you would make you not only feel alive, but make you addicted to that sway from one. It's a polarity from one end to the other, as opposed to just being centered, where it's just peaceful and calm, balanced, where you don't have the need to be hysterically laughing funny or to be angered, fearful, outraged, pissed off, worried, freaked out, scared. Some people like to make themselves scared on purpose. That's why people go to thrillers. They like to see, bloody, gory horror films or thriller films just to be frightened, because they have that addiction to that adrenaline rush of being in the fight or flight mode. Technology is a great distraction and a powerful addiction. Think about it. You can immediately change your internal chemistry and make a feeling go away by changing something outside of you. And whatever it was outside of you that made you feel better inside of you, you will rely on that thing in order to sidetrack yourself over and over again. But this strategy doesn't have to involve technology. Anything momentarily thrilling will do the trick. So when we keep that diversion up, guess what eventually happens? We grow more dependent on something outside of us to change us internally. Some people unconsciously delve deeper and deeper into this bottomless pit, using different aspects of their world to keep themselves preoccupied in an effort to recreate the original feeling from the very first experience that helped them escape. They became overstimulated so that they can feel different from how they really are. But sooner or later, everyone realizes that they need more and more of the same to make themselves feel better. And this becomes an all consuming search for pleasure and ways to avoid pain at all costs. A hedonistic life, unconsciously driven by some feeling that won't seem to go away. Some people, I'm going to say men and women alike, some people have an overwhelming feeling that they have to engage in the observation and the viewing of pornography, either in still photos or pornography in terms of movies or videos, because it's that distraction that they need, that adrenaline rush that they need, that type of stimulation in order to not deal with those unpleasant emotions. So, or some people, for some people, it's sexual addiction, or it could be chain smoking. There is no limit. Some people get into cutting, where they actually physically cut their arms or their thighs. As a, for most people, that would be unthinkable to harm yourself, to cut yourself. But to some people who have certain traumatic past, that pain is a relief. It actually feels good to them as opposed to feeling bad, which I know to me it doesn't make any sense. But I've talked to people who have had these issues. And so for them, they have an addiction to that because that gives them a relief of the pain that they're feeling inside by giving themselves an outside pain. Okay, moving on here. A different midlife, a time for facing feelings and letting go of illusions. So at this time of life, other people who don't strive to keep their feelings buried ask some big questions. I'll read that again. At this time of life, other people who don't strive to keep their feelings buried. So I wonder if he's implying that people who do keep their feelings buried don't ask, who am I? I think the who am I question is a universal question that I think all humans have, but I might be wrong. I don't know. Okay, so who am I? What is my purpose in life? Where am I going? Who am I doing all of this for? What is God? Where do I go when I die? Is there more to life than success? What is happiness? What does all of this mean? What is love? Do I love myself? Do I love anyone else? And the soul begins to wake up. Okay, so big pause button here, because I know that for myself, I can only speak from my own personal experience, and perhaps only one person who's watching this video may relate to this. But I remember leading up to my decision to actually get divorced back in 2012. I remember going through a period of time once I decided, okay, I'm definitely going to get divorced, and I can't wait another, 6 years to do this. I need to do this. I'm going to have to do this next summer. And that was in 2012. I decided that the summer of 2013, I was going to say something to my husband, and I was just going to wait for I had 3 kids, so I was waiting for the youngest to be done with school so that it was over the summertime. So as moving forward through that process, I told him that I was going to be filing for divorce, and then the ensuing time that ensued during the divorce period, one of the things that came up for me wasn't so much who I am, because I knew who I was. I thought I knew what my purpose was as I was embarking in that, but that started to morph and change unbeknownst to me. That was kind of a surprise because I didn't anticipate that. And the where am I going was clear for a while, and then that changed. But what really made me question everything in terms of, it was kind of like an existential type of quicksand, if you will, because I started questioning love. I knew that I knew the love of mother and child, the love that I had for my kids. I knew the love that I had for my parents, the love that I had for my siblings, the love that I had for my friends, the love between myself and God. That love seemed pretty clear to me. But a romantic love, I was thinking, I go, what is that? I don't even know that I really know that. And I started questioning the whole, just love as an entity in and of itself, even though I had a recognition that God is love, but I started questioning anything that was surrounding love. And I don't know if that's something that everybody who goes through divorce perhaps goes through. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. I just know that I really had to do a study on love. And even though I had I had read who knows how many books on love and relationships and positive mental attitude, agape love, love from a spiritual sense, love from all sorts of different aspects. Going back to, I was studying love from the time I was in high school. First book I read, I'll never forget. It was a red paperback book, and it just, in white letters, it said love. And it was a book by Dr. Leo Buscaglia, fellow paisano. And he happened to be a professor at USC, which when I was in high school, I think I read the book when I was, a sophomore in high school. And then I ended up going to USC. And the year that I went to USC, I was hoping to take one of his classes. And his class was always packed. It's like, there was a waiting list to get into his classes. Then he went on sabbatical, and then he never came back. And so I never got to take a class with him, unfortunately. But that was the first book that I read on love. But he talks about here how you question, what is God? Where do I go when I die? I didn't really have a question about where. I've always been kind of clear on that. Is there more to life than success? That I did question, because, if you're living where you have not just all of your needs met, but you have more than enough to cover everything that you need, and you're living a happy, healthy lifestyle, you have health, you have, your financial needs are taken care of. It makes you question, okay, what is success if you're not happy? If you're not in a loving relationship, you're not able to give love. It's not able to be received. You don't feel that you're in a loving relationship. It makes you question, love, and it makes you question really what is success, and why do you even want success if you don't have the right person to share it with? Then what's the point? And so I remember going through all of that. And, he says here, what does this all mean? What does it all mean? What is love? Do I love myself? I remember thinking, do I love myself? I thought, yeah, I love myself. How can I not love myself? Well, I did love myself, but in a limited fashion. What I later learned was that I loved myself conditionally, not unconditionally, because I only loved myself if I was working hard. I only loved myself if I was producing X, Y, and Z. I only loved myself, you fill in the blank, because I had these certain thought patterns that I thought were me, that were not me, but it was part of the programming, the programs that had been downloaded into me, which I had been programmed with. And so, do I love anyone else? And the soul begins to wake up. Yeah, your soul does begin. It seems like your soul wakes up for me, it's been in stages. So these types of questions begin to occupy the mind because we see through the illusion and suspect that nothing outside of us can ever make us happy, which is not true. It's an illusion. We think that nothing outside of us can make us happy. The truth is, nothing outside of us. those things can make us temporarily happy, but really ultimate happiness is something that you choose no matter what. It's, I'm happy because I decide that I am happy. No matter what the circumstances are, I am choosing to be happy. And the happiness is a well that's deep within inside me, that's coming from this open heart that loves unconditionally and is connected to the great I am. And once you have that in place, your whole perspective changes. So some of us ultimately realize that nothing in our environment is going to fix the way we feel. We also recognize the enormous amount of energy it takes to keep up this projection of self as an image to the world, and how exhausting it is to keep the mind and body constantly preoccupied. Eventually, we come to see that our futile attempt to maintain an ideal for others is really a strategy to make sure that those impending feelings we've been running from never capture us. Ooh, that sounds scary. I'm going to read that again to you because I want you to catch. I don't know how many of you are experiencing at this very moment in time, or who did experience it and now have that behind you. Whew. We also recognize the enormous amount of energy it takes to keep up this projection of self as an image to the world, and how exhausting it is to keep the mind and body constantly preoccupied. That is exhausting. Eventually, we come to see that our futile attempt to maintain an ideal for others is really a strategy to make sure that those impending feelings we've been running from never capture us. So you're running away from those impending feelings because you don't want it to ever, it's like the boogeyman trying to catch up with you. So how long can we juggle keeping so many balls up in the air just so our lives don't come crashing down? Hit the pause button here, because for some people, their lives do come crashing down. All of a sudden, they get into a horrible accident, or they get diagnosed with a horrible disease. They've been juggling. Have you ever seen when you have that person who has a stick, and on top of the stick, they have a plate, a china plate, and it's spinning, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll have 4, 5, 6 plates that are spinning on the sticks, and they keep on having to, like, manically move to keep the spinning those plates, because heaven forbid this plate starts to slow down, then it's going to start to wobble and it'll fall and break. And that's what some of us have done. It's like you're juggling. It's like you got to keep all those plates spinning, spin. You have to keep on going back and forth. You can't stop, because if you slow down even a little bit, one of those plates are going to break. They'll fall off the stick and break. Well, that's until something bad happens, and now all of a sudden all the plates come crashing down, and now you have to face the pauper, as they say. So eventually we come to see that our futile attempt to maintain an ideal for others is really a strategy to make sure that those impending feelings we've been running from never capture us. How long can we juggle keeping so many balls in the air just so our lives don't come crashing in, don't come crashing down? Instead of buying a bigger TV or the latest smartphone, these people stop running from the feeling that they've been trying to make go away for so long. Face it head on and intently look at it. When this happens, the individual begins to wake up. After some self-reflection, she discovers who she really is, what she has been hiding, which are emotions usually, or it could be he was hiding emotions. Men and women both are equally guilty of this, and what no longer is working for him or for her. So she lets go of the facade, the games, and the illusions. She is honest about who she really is at all costs, and she is not afraid to lose it all. This person stops expending the energy she had been putting into keeping an illusory image intact. She gets in touch with her feelings, because that's where your true power lies, is in acknowledging all of your feelings, not just the good feelings, but good, bad, and indifferent. And then turns to people in her life and says, you know what? Doesn't matter if I don't make you happy. any longer. I'm through obsessing about how I look or what other people think about me. I am finished living for everyone else. I want to be free from these chains. It's almost like he's mind reading from who I was to who I am now. There are many things in the last several years that I never would have done because I was so fettered from what would people think to everything that he's talked about here. And really getting in touch with who I am and what my feelings are showing me. So this is a profound moment in a person's life. The soul is waking up and nudging her or him to tell the truth about who she really is. The lie is over. Change and our relationships, breaking the ties that bind. So most relationships are based on what you have in common with others. So think about this. You meet a person and immediately the two of you compare your experiences. That's what most people do. As if you are both checking to see whether your neural networks and emotional memories are aligned. You say something like this: I know these people. I am from this place, and I lived in these places at these different times in my life. I went to this school and studied the subject. I own and do these things. And most important, I've had these experiences. Then the other person responds, I know those people. I lived in those places during those times. I do these things too. I had those same experiences. Thus, you can relate to each other. A relationship is then formed based on neurochemical states of being. Because if you share the same experiences, you share the same emotions. So think of emotions as energy in motion. If you share the same emotions, you share the same energy. And just like two atoms of oxygen that share an invisible field of energy beyond space and time in order to bond together in a relationship to form air, you are bonded in an invisible field of energy. You are bonded in an invisible field of energy to everything, person, and place in your external life. Bonds between people are the strongest because emotions hold the strongest energy. So as long as either party doesn't change, things will just be fine. Figure 7C. If we share the same experiences, we share the same emotions and the same energy, just like two atoms of oxygen bond to form the air we breathe. An invisible field of energy beyond space and time bonds us emotionally. So when our friend in the last example, in the last section, begins to tell the truth about how she really feels, things begin to get very uncomfortable. If her friendships have been based upon complaining about life, then she is bonded energetically in her relationships by the emotions of victimization. If in a moment of enlightenment, she now decides to break from that habit of being herself, she is no longer showing up as a familiar person to whom everyone could relate. People in her life are using her to remind themselves of who they are emotionally as well. Friends and family respond, what is wrong with you today? You've hurt my feelings, which translates to, I thought we had a good thing going here. I used you to reaffirm my emotional addiction in order to remember who I think I am as a somebody. I liked you better the other way. When it comes to change, our energy is connected to everything that we've had an experience with in our outer world. When we break the addiction of emotion we've memorized, or when we tell the truth about who we really are, doing that takes some real energy, just as it takes energy to separate two atoms of oxygen that are bonded together. It takes energy to break the bonds with the people in our lives. Listen to that carefully. It takes energy to break the bonds with people in our lives. I'm going to hit the pause button here because if any of you have been through a breakup, you'll know that there's an energy that ties you even after you break up. And I've been through a couple breakups in my life. One was from obviously my husband, who was my first boyfriend. And then I had a boyfriend after that marriage. And we had a breakup. And make no mistakes, I realized the same day that we had that breakup, I had the conscious awareness. First of all, I couldn't believe it was happening. Second of all, I thought, I will not and I do not want to suffer. I am going to do whatever spiritual and energetic work I need to do tonight, because I am not going to be mucking around with this for a year or two or three. I know too much to not gift myself that. And I love myself enough to know that I deserve better. And so I'm going to take care of me. So that same evening, I went within, I cried, I grieved, I allowed myself to just have that emotional release, and I wept. And then I went through there were 5 steps that I took, but the first thing I did was I emotionally and energetically and spiritually cut the cord of energy that was between himself and myself. And then I tore up whatever soul contract there was between the two of us. And I threw it in the allegorical fire pit. And much to my surprise, even though I slept very little, I think I only slept 2 hours in the wee hours of the morning. And once I woke up from that 2-hour nap, it was shocking how free I felt and how good I felt. And I thought to myself, what is going on? Because I don't feel sad at all. I realized that there was a weight that was lifted off of my shoulders. And I legitimately felt good. And my brain, my IQ, could not make intellectual sense of that. But I felt fantastic. And I had this incredible peace because of course, I basically meditated that whole evening. And I didn't realize the journey. That night, my life took a big change. And I had no idea that the months that were going to unfold and reveal itself, I had a whole other life that all of a sudden, my life had, in that relationship, had become very stagnant, very stuck, very small, very minimized, very away from everything. I had been minimized in that relationship. And now I was free to really be me. And I got back into the energetic flow where now my miracles were starting to happen again. I had all this serendipity. I had all this wondrous stuff. Things out of nowhere started to present itself before me. And my life took a quantum leap, a radical change. It's also what led me to Dr. Joe's work. I was still recovering from having been hit by a bus. I still was doing everything I could to get relief from my neck, because I couldn't do what I'm doing right now. It's like, just to look at my cell phone, I would have to hold my cell phone like this because I couldn't even look a little bit down like this. It was just painful to look at my cell phone. I couldn't read because everything was kind of blurry. Every now and then I still have the blurs during different times of the day. For the most part, it's much better now. But it was a struggle. And so here he's talking about how it takes energy to break the bonds with the people in our lives. And some of you have probably gone through a breakup and you don't realize, if you haven't done that energetic work to cut the bond, if you've just had a verbal breakup and you're now not talking anymore, maybe you haven't talked to them for, it could be months, it could even be a year, you still can be connected where you still have their energy in your plane. Vice versa in either direction. And you can't worry about what they do, because if you've broken up with them, they're off with their life, you're on with yours. You have to take care of you. And so you have to do some emotional, spiritual cleaning to break those bonds of energy that you have. In fact, I have a YouTube video that I put up 5 steps on how to get over a breakup. You might want to take a look at it. It was interesting because I never really solicited, to share that aspect of myself, but I got over myself, and there were people on Facebook who started reaching out to me, and after repeating the same thing over and over again, I decided, I'm just going to do a video so that way I can just send the video. It saves me time. The person still gets the information. Anybody who reaches out to me, I don't even know how they found out that I broke up with my boyfriend and how I was doing, because I never put on my Facebook profile that I had a boyfriend, or I've always kept my private life very private. So I don't know how that ended up, how, that was revealed. But the point is, I kept on having women who would private message me. Although my whole life, I've always had people who've come to me to counsel them ever since I was in high school. I'd never had a boyfriend in high school, and yet girls would come to me all the time. Few guys, but mostly girls that would come to me for relationship advice. And here I'd never had a boyfriend at that point, but they would always come to me to counsel them. So long story short, I just want you to be aware that Dr. Joe is talking about the energy that it takes to break the bonds with people in our lives. And that's something that you had to take responsibility for, because nobody can do it for you. And if you are not knowing that there is a cleanup that needs to take place for your benefit, it also benefits the other person, but you just have to take responsibility for you and clean that aspect of your life. And it's shocking to me. When I've counseled other men and women to go through this process, I can make no guarantees because I don't know, I'm not going to know what it's like to be in their body. All I can say is, like, the people that I've led through it, I'm always pleasantly surprised when they come back and they tell me the next day, it's like, oh, I did this last night. And the days moving forward, I did the, steps 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it's like, it's crazy how quickly it works. It's like, wow. It's because it doesn't make intellectual sense. You do it not thinking that it's going to make that much of a difference, or maybe it'll, reveal itself in a few days. And it works pretty quickly. You definitely feel something right away. So the individuals in this person's life who have shared the same emotional bonds with her rally together and say, she hasn't been herself lately. Maybe she's lost her mind. Let's get her to a doctor. Now remember that they have been people she shared the same experiences with, hence they shared the same emotions, the energetic bonds with everyone and everything, and even every place familiar. This is a threatening moment for everyone who has been playing the same game with her for years. She's getting off the train. So they bring her to the doctor, who gives her Prozac or some other drug, and in short time, the person's former personality returns. And there she is, projecting her old image to the world, right back to shaking hands on others' emotional agreements. Once more, she's numb and smiling. Anything to take the feeling away. The lesson goes unlearned. Yes, the person wasn't being herself, not the top hand self that everyone had grown accustomed to. Instead, briefly, she was the bottom hand self, the one with the past and the pain, and who can blame those loved ones who insisted on the return to her former numbed self that went along to get along. That went along to get along. It's like, have you heard the saying, peace at any price? Ladies and gentlemen, peace at any price. The price is you. You have to put your life down, and you're going to have to forgo your life to do peace at any price. If you want to volunteer, I suppose so, but you don't have to. There is a better way. And that's what Dr. Joe is trying to share here. There is a better way. You don't have to do peace at any price. You can choose you can choose to be authentic and be in integrity and not cop out. So that new self emerged as unpredictable, even radical. Who wants to be around that person? Who wants to be around the truth? What really matters in the end If you need the environment in order to remember who you are as a somebody, what happens when you die and the environment rolls up and disappears? Do you know what goes with it? The somebody, the identity, the image, the personality, top hand, that has identified with all the known and the predictable elements in life, who is addicted to the environment. You could have been the most successful, popular, or beautiful person, and you could have had all the wealth you ever needed. But when your life ends and your external reality is taken away, everything outside of you can no longer define you. It all goes. What you're left with is who you really are, bottom hand, not how you appear. When your life is over and you cannot rely on your external world to define you, you will be left with that feeling you never addressed. You would not have evolved as a soul in that lifetime. For instance, if you had certain experiences 50 years prior that marked you as insecure or weak, and you felt that way about yourself ever since, then you stopped growing emotionally 50 years ago. If the soul's purpose is to learn from experience and gain wisdom, but you stayed stuck in that particular emotion, you never turned your experience into a lesson. That should be a newsflash. You never turned your experience into a lesson. You didn't transcend that emotion and exchange it for any understanding. If you're suppressing it, you're not dealing with it, you haven't learned a freaking lesson. And I was stuck on that scratch record of not learning the lesson because I did not want to deal with any negative emotions, any emotions of sadness, of being unhappy, emotions of being unsatisfied, of not having my voice heard. In the business world, I could speak up and do whatever, move mountains. But when it came to my personal life, it's like almost like I had like a lock on my throat that would not allow, and it was me not allowing me to express myself because of the conditioning that I had from when I was brought up, that my mother would not allow me to express a dislike, something unwanted, anything sad, anything that bothered me, because only physical pain was a good reason for being sad or upset or frustrated. But emotional pain or psychological pain was not a good reason to feel sadness or pain or anger or any of those things. Heaven forbid, no. So, and I'm not saying that I blame her, because she did the best that she could. When she knew better, she's done better. And when I had to, I'm a grown up now. I can't point at everybody else as a grown up, blaming everybody else and not taking responsibility. It's like, no, your parents do the best that they can, just as you do the best that you can when you raise your kids. And at a certain point in time, you have to take personal inventory. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Let me see. Okay, these behaviors, this is all working out good. This is all working out good. Wait a minute. You know what? Bottling up all these emotions and not being true to myself and copping out here, this has pretty dire consequences. Whoa, I didn't even realize that by suppressing all these emotions, suppressing all of this, even though it doesn't feel natural for me to open up and do all of this, but I'm actually giving a lot of my personal power away by not standing in my truth. Wait a minute. There's nothing about that that's okay. I don't want to be giving my personal power away, but I am giving my personal power away here. But I'm not standing in integrity. I'm being deceptive when I'm not being honest. If I'm not speaking my truth, if I'm saying that everything is okay when it's not okay, not only is that a crime against me, but it's also a crime against the other person too, because they should know the truth. They should be entitled to knowing what my truth is, even if they don't agree with it. We can agree to disagree. That's a perfectly okay place and state of being. I can believe one thing, you can believe another. We don't have to see everything exactly the same. It's kind of what makes us interesting, after all. Doesn't mean that we have to be mad at each other, or I don't have to eventually win you over to thinking how I think, or vice versa. No, you can choose to believe what you believe. I can choose to believe what I believe. We can agree to disagree. That's fine. At some point in time, maybe I'll see things more like you do, maybe not. Either way, it's okay. That's part of the beauty of getting to that point where you recognize these things. So your soul says, pay attention. I'm letting you know that nothing is bringing you joy. I'm sending you urges. If you keep playing this game, I'm going to stop trying to get your attention and you will go back to sleep. Then I'll see you when your life is over. I'm going to read that again. So, and if a similar experience shows up in your present life, that event will trigger the same emotion and you will act as that person you were 50 years ago. So your soul says, pay attention. I'm letting you know that nothing is bringing you joy. I'm sending you urges. If you keep playing this game, I'm going to stop trying to get your attention and you will go back to sleep. Then I'll see you when your life is over. Friends and gems, don't go back to sleep. Don't wait till the end of your life where you go back to sleep and now you got to come back and do this lesson all over again from scratch. No, pay attention. It always takes more and more. Oprah likes to say, first you get a nudge, a little tap on the shoulder, a nudge upside the head. And if you don't pay attention to the nudge and the, hit against the head, you'll eventually get a brick that hits you in the head. Now you're flat on your back in the hospital. The only place for you to look now is up flat on your back. And now you have to pay attention because now you've got all the time in the world. Because when you're hooked up to IVs and you're in a hospital bed, trust me, you will have the time to confront yourself. That's all you have. As someone who was on bed rest, not once, not twice, but 3 times for up to a year, I know what I'm talking about. And each time I learned something different. Make no mistakes. The universe was getting my attention where it had to put me on my back, not once, not twice, but 3 times, because I was the ever ready bunny and I was always driving in 5th gear at 150 miles an hour. So it had to put me flat on my back. It's like, you won't slow down? Boom, we're going to stop you. Hard stop. I thought I learned the lesson the first time. Boom, flat on my back a second time. I thought, okay, I got it, slow down, boom, a third time. So I know this drill. So it always takes more and more. So most people who do not know how to change think, how can I make this feeling go away? And if the novelty of accumulating new things wears off and stops working, what do? They look to bigger things, a whole other layer above where they were, and their avoidance strategies become addictions. If I take a drug or drink enough alcohol, that's going to make this feeling go away. This external thing will produce an internal chemical change and make me feel great. I'll shop a lot because shopping, even if I don't have the money, makes that emptiness go away. For shopaholics. I'll watch pornography. I'll play video games. I'll gamble. I'll overeat. You see? Those are the different coping mechanisms, the different ways that people try to do things to take away that inner emptiness, that feeling of unease that's inside. But if you recognize that, you just quiet yourself down and find out, okay, what's the root of that? Why is it that I feel that? Be willing to sit with that uncomfortable emotion and find out what is the root cause of that, and what is it trying to tell me? What is it trying to show me? What is the lesson that I can learn from this feeling that I don't like? Figure 7D. When the same people and things in our lives create the same emotions and The feeling we are trying to make go away no longer changes. We look for new people and things or try going to new places in an attempt to change how we feel emotionally. If that doesn't work, we go to the next level, addictions. Whatever the addiction, people are still thinking that some external thing is going to take the internal feeling away. And remember, we have this natural propensity to associate an external thing that's making that feeling go away with our internal chemical change. And we like that external thing if it makes us feel good. So we run away from that, from what feels bad or painful, and we move towards what feels good and comfortable or brings us pleasure. As the excitement people get from addiction continually stimulates the pleasure centers in the brain, they get a flood of chemicals from the thrill of the experience. The problem is that each time they gamble, binge, or stay up late playing online games, they need a little bit more the next time. Little pause button right here, because one of the things that a lot of people are not aware of it is that oftentimes people go to alcohol to numb the feelings that they have of some sort of emotional pain. Usually, alcohol is used as an anesthetic, not for physical pain, although it can be used for physical pain, but more often than not, you'll find that a lot of people can't cope with some sort of negative emotion. Either it's a negative emotion that stems from childhood, or it could be a negative emotion that maybe originally stemmed from childhood, but now is present because there's a similar situation that's drudging up those feelings from childhood in the now, in that relationship, which has a similar dynamic to childhood. And the resistance of not wanting to feel that sadness, to feel that anger, that worry, that hurt, oftentimes it's a deep seated hurt, will make that person reach over for alcohol to self soothe. To self soothe and to, you've heard the expression, it's like, oh my gosh, that person is being so annoying, it's driving me to drink. Or it's like, oh yeah, he's getting on her nerves so bad that it's driving her to drink, or driving him to drink, or driving both of them to drink. Because sometimes you have both a husband and a wife where both of them are alcoholics. Heaven forbid, that's got to be awful. It's bad enough with one, but to have both, I've seen that too, oftentimes where it's like both of them are alcoholics. It's like, whew. But make no mistakes, if you find that you can't go a day without drinking alcohol, you may want to sit and ponder, why is it that I have to take this alcohol? What is it that I'm trying to not feel? What kind of emotion is it that I'm trying to mask, that I'm not wanting to deal with? You may want to sit and say, okay, instead of reaching over for this drink, let me instead, I'm going to get something else to drink and sip on, and let me contemplate, what is this feeling? What's the root cause? What is it that I'm not wanting to deal with? And perhaps in dealing with it in that moment, it's possible. Sometimes it's like a sugar cube, where just you're dealing with it in that moment will make it completely dissolve. And then that's it. You're free of that energy. So the reason why people need more drugs or more shopping or more affairs is that chemical rush that's created from those activities activates the receptor sites on the outside of their cells, which turns on the cells. But if receptor sites are continuously stimulated, they get desensitized and shut off. So they need a stronger signal, a bit more stimulation, to turn them on the next time. It takes a bigger chemical high to produce the same effects. So now you've got to bet $25,000 instead of $10,000, because otherwise there's no thrill. Once a $5,000 shopping spree does nothing for you, you've got to max out 2 credit cards so you can feel that same rush again. All of this to make the feeling of who you really are go away. Isn't that a crazy thought? That you're trying to make the feeling of who you are go away. It's like you're trying to erase yourself. That's twisted if you think about it. If you're trying to erase, you're trying to delete, you're trying not to feel who you truly are, that should be a wake-up call. Wouldn't you agree? Everything you do to get the same high, you have to keep doing more of with increasing intensity, more drugs, more alcohol, more sex, more gambling, more shopping, more TV, more. You get the idea. Over time, we become addicted to something in order to ease the pain or anxiety or depression we live by on a daily basis. Is this wrong? Not really. Most people do these things because they don't know how to change from the inside. They are only following the innate drive to get relief from their feelings. And unconsciously, they think their salvation comes from the outside world. It has never been explained to them that using the outer world to change the inner world makes things worse. It only widens the gap. And let's say that our ambition in life is to become successful and to accumulate. Just to accumulate more things, when we do, we reinforce who we are without ever addressing how we really feel. I call this being possessed by our possessions. We become possessed by material objects, and those things reinforce the ego, which needs the environment to remind itself of who it is. If we wait for anything outside of us to make us happy or whole, I would add, then we are not following the quantum law. We are relying on the outer to change the inner. If we are thinking that once we have the wealth to buy more things, then we will be overjoyed, we've got it backward. We have to become happy before our abundance shows up. And what happens if addicts can get more? They feel even angrier, more frustrated, more bitter, more empty. They may try other methods, add gambling to drinking, add shopping to TV and movie escapism. Eventually, though, nothing is ever enough. The pleasure centers have recalibrated to such a high level that when there is no chemical change from the outer world, it seems the addict now cannot find joy in the simplest of things, which is a red flag. All the same, I've known broke people who cannot find joy in the simplest of things. One of the things that I saw throughout my career is that money serves as a magnifier of who you truly are. Make no mistakes, if you're a jackass when you're broke and all of a sudden you make money, you'll be a bigger jackass the more money you have. If you're a kind and generous person when you don't have money, as you acquire more money, you will become even more kind and generous because money magnifies who you truly are. So the point is, true happiness has nothing to do with pleasure. The point is, true happiness has nothing to do with pleasure because the reliance on feeling good from such intensely stimulating things only moves us further from real joy. So the bigger the gap, emotional addiction. I don't intend to diminish the severity of the damage caused by what I'll loosely refer to as material addictions to drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, consumerism, and so forth. Those problems cause great harm to the numerous people who suffer from them and to those who love and work with such addicts. While many people who experience these and other addictions can use the steps in these pages to overcome them, since they are a part of the big three, it's beyond the scope of this book to deal with these kinds of addictions specifically. But it is imperative to realize that behind every addiction, there is some sort of memorized emotion that is driving that behavior. Pay close attention to what Dr. Joe just said here. It is imperative to realize that behind every addiction, there is some memorized emotion that is driving that behavior of that addiction. What is not beyond the scope of this book is, in fact, its central purpose is helping people break the habit of being themselves, whether they view that self as being an alcoholic, a sexaholic, a gambler, a shopaholic, or someone who is chronically lonely, depressed, angry, bitter, or physically unwell. I'm going to stop right here because I did get to meet and saw also some testimonials of people. There was a young gal, I recall, who also has her testimonial on YouTube where she talked about her having a horrible pot addiction. She was terribly addicted to weed from the time, I guess, she was in junior high. And she was now a young person in her early 20s. And she really dived deep into marijuana use throughout her high school and college years. And now she's in her early 20s. And she wanted to break this addiction. She realized how it was ruining her life, but she couldn't quit. And her consumption, the volume, had really gone up. And so her parents had heard of Dr. Joe, and they called it to her attention to see if she would be willing to go and to read his books and to go. In order to go to his 7-day advance, you have to have read his book and you have to have done his progressive. There's two trainings that you need to do prior to actually going to a 7-day advance event of his. And so she was willing to. She was really wanting to make this change. And so she talks about the transformation that took place and how she was able to free herself from the horrible addiction that she had of weed. And she talks about the stupor in which she was during that whole period of, I think it was over a decade and a half, something like that, of her weed addiction, and how it had really destroyed and taken over her whole life. And she's not the only one. There's been other people who have had different addictions as well. So in thinking about the gap, possibly you said to yourself, well, of course we hide from other people our fears, insecurities, weaknesses, and dark side. If we gave those things free rein to be fully expressed, we'd likely be beyond anyone else's caring about us, let alone our caring about ourselves. In a sense, that's true. But if we are to break free, it means we have to confront the true self and bring out into the light that shadow side of our personality. The advantage of the system I employ is that you can confront those darker aspects of yourself without bringing them into the light of your everyday reality. So you don't have to walk into your place of work or a family gathering and announce, hey, listen, everyone, I'm a bad person because for a long time I resented my parents for having to spend a lot of time with my younger sibling while I felt my needs were being neglected. So now I'm a really selfish person who craves attention and needs instant gratification in order to stop feeling unloved and inadequate. Instead, in the privacy of your own home and your own mind, you can work on extinguishing the negative aspects of yourself and replacing those characteristics, or at least metaphorically cutting way back on the role they play and allowing them only an occasional brief appearance with more positive and productive ones. So I want you to forget about the past events validating the emotions you memorized that have become part of your personality. Your problems will never be resolved by analyzing them while you are still caught up in the emotions of the past. Now, I'm going to repeat this again because Dr. Joe drills this point home over and over and over again throughout the entire 7-day advance, because the brain that created the problem wants to go back and analyze, bathed in the emotions of the past, trying to create a different outcome of the future, which is by definition impossible. I'm going to read it verbatim here. Your problems will never be resolved by analyzing them while you are still caught up in the emotions of the past. Looking at the experience or reliving the event that created the problem in the first place will only bring up the old emotions and a reason to feel the same way, because you're going to justify and you're going to rationalize how you are feeling because you're reliving the emotions of the past. So you're bringing those emotions that you were feeling in that past event, you're bringing it into your present. And in your present, as you look back at that past, refeeling those emotions, you are justifying and you are rationalizing. You're rationing out a portion of lies to yourself. That's what you're doing. That's what rationalizing is, to ration lies out to self. So of course you can't solve that. No wonder you can't forgive. No wonder you can't let it go. You're stuck on a scratch record of the past, and you keep on bringing it here in the now, which means that you're going to bring it into your future, because in your future you're going to look back to today and recall yesterday and continue. It's like you're dragging a dead body through time and space. What a waste of energy. Does that make sense? So when you try to figure out your life within the same consciousness that created it, you will analyze your life away and excuse yourself from ever changing, because you're still reliving the past. You're still bathed in the emotions of that moment in time that was back there, and you're bringing it into your now. So tomorrow when you're over there, you're going to come back to today, which is dragging that dead body from the past. It's an emotional pain body, and you're dragging that weight. It's a colossal amount of weight that you're having to expend to do that, which is exhausting, which is not giving you any energy so that you can create a new life, to create a new you, to create new experiences with new people, with new places, new things, new. Instead, let's just unmemorize our self-limiting emotions. A memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. Okay, my little tidbit to you. This is not a Dr. Joeism. This is a Lillianism. Wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom, there's a clue in the word wisdom. That's why I say that words are so powerful. When you have wisdom, you have wise dominion over an experience. There's some sort of experience in your past that had a lesson, and now when you have a wise dominion over that particular lesson, that experience that gave you a lesson, now you have a jewel that you can throw on your crown. And you're like, okay, now you have wisdom. You don't have to repeat that experience again now, because it's wisdom. You can tear up the old karma contract that you had related to that. You don't have to repeat it because you got it. Now you have wisdom. You've distilled it down to the least common denominator. You got it. Now you can move on. Isn't that cool? Then we can look back objectively upon the event and see it and who we were being without the filter of the emotion, because now we're neutralized. If we take care of unmemorizing the emotional state or eliminating it to the best of our ability, then we gain the freedom to live and think and act independent of the restraints or constraints of that feeling. So if a person relinquished unhappiness and got on with his life, entered into a new relationship, got a new job, moved to a new place, I would say new business, it doesn't have to be a job, you can move on in a new business, moved to a new place, made new friends, and then he looked at the past event, he would see that it provided the adversity he needed in order to overcome who he was and become a new person. His new perspective would change just by seeing that he could actually overcome the problem. That's half the battle, realizing that you can overcome that problem, or for that matter, having the recognition. I think this is something that some people struggle with. They often get into certain relationships and they don't believe that they themselves inherently have the wherewithal to overcome any circumstance in life. And because they can't embrace the fact that they can overcome any circumstance in life, anything that life throws them way, they recoil, break up, and run away. Because it's hard enough them having to deal with themselves to have somebody else in the mix. They cannot inherently take care of overcoming whatever the life circumstance is that they're facing with. To have another person involved in their life, it's just too much for them. They freak out and they run away. I personally have always thought there isn't anything life will throw my way. I've had some pretty daunting adversity, like I talked about, being flat on my back 3 times, for up to a year, just to have my 3 kids. And I lost the one before that, the first, my oldest son now. So I've had some other things that have happened as well. So I know, I've always known that there isn't anything that life will throw in my direction that I can't handle. And luckily, my husband, that relationship worked for a long time. 2 decades is a long time. But luckily, he was of enough sound mind, and he was emotionally mature enough to realize that individually there isn't anything that life would throw our way that we couldn't handle, and most certainly together there wasn't anything that would be thrown our way that we couldn't handle. It didn't matter financial, emotional, spiritual, physiological, medical, didn't matter. We knew that whatever it was that was thrown our way, that we would be able to handle. And then it came to pass. And so when you have that knowingness and that self-confidence, it's not just a self-confidence within yourself. For me, it came from the fact that I knew that it wasn't just me. I didn't have to just stand by myself in my own power. It was knowing that I had a power greater than me that had my back, and that I was tuned in and tapped into that. So I had a lot more than just the little me that had to confront whatever those situations were. So standing in that truth, I know that it doesn't matter what life throws my way, I will be able to overcome it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a challenge, but I know that I'm going to come out the other side and I'm going to be fine, and then I'm going to be bigger, stronger than I was before. But not everybody believes that. And so some people they have a life script of always running away, which is I think it's a very sad and a very pathetic and a very desperate place to live in. And if you find yourself with that kind of life script, and you notice that that's how you have felt and how you have thought, you can choose today to make that something that is now part of your past. And as of tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you can say, that's how I used to be, because yesterday I chose that was no longer going to be my personality, was no longer going to be part of my reality. And now the new me knows that there isn't anything that life will throw to me that I won't be able to handle. And you can put in your calendar, June 4th was the day where I drew a line in the sand, and this is me no longer. And the new me is resilient. There isn't anything, I don't know how, but I know that somewhere, somehow, I will be able to figure this out. And I am tuned in, tapped in, and turned on. I know now how to get into heart and into brain coherence. I know how to be one with the one, and how to tune into the quantum level. So I am tapped into infinite source intelligence, where all the answers are, even when it's not obvious to you what the answers are, in the forefront. I know that it'll be revealed, and I know that I can create also. I can mold the clay in that dimension and create that which it is that I want. And it's a very empowering place to stand in. And that's why, even though there's a lot of unknowns, there are a lot of knowns that you can create in that reality. And that reality is actually a real thing. It's not just some foo-foo thing. It really is. And science is now proving that is a reality, there is truth there, which is very exciting. So closing and even eliminating the gap between who we are and who we present to the world is likely the greatest challenge we all face in life. Whether we term this living authentically, conquering ourselves, or having people get us or accept us for who we are, this is something that most of us desire. Changing, closing the gap must begin from within. Okay, so there is a thing or two that I want to comment on this, because he says here, whether we term this living authentically, which it is, conquering ourselves, mastering ourselves, or having people get us or accept us for who we are, this is something that most of us desire. I would agree with that. However, I'm going to interject here that you get to a point and place where having people get us or accept us for who we are You don't need the whole world to get you. You don't need the whole world to accept you for who you are. For me, I've come to a point in time where I don't worry about who gets me, who doesn't get me, who agrees with me, who doesn't agree with me, who accepts me, who doesn't accept me. No, there comes a point in time where you just have to stand alone in your own authentic truth, in your place of knowingness of who you truly are, not just as this meat suit, but who your inner being shows up in this world as. Whoever accepts you, great. Whoever doesn't accept you, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. You don't pay attention to the naysayers, the it's the self-identified fools that are the naysayers, the criticizers, the negative speakers. Why would you give any attention to those kind of people? They're the ones who are small little people who never amount to anything. They're usually broke, sad, pathetic. So why would you give them any, it's easy to hide behind an anonymous, social media identity and spew venom because that's all you do all day long because you don't amount to anything yourself. Why would you care about a lower life form like that? No, this is not a popularity contest. When you are in this more authentic place of being, sure, somebody might be watching this going, it's like, look at that. She's just a talking head there all day long, all night long, whatever. All of her videos, it's just a talking head. What do I care that somebody thinks about that? They have the free will to click the X at the top of this and not watch this. They can go watch something else. If they're choosing to watch this, obviously they're getting some benefit out of it. And if they don't like it, what do I care if they don't like it? I am here to resonate with just a select small number of people. I am here to address maybe for this video, maybe it's only one person. That's fine. And I don't have to worry about who that person is. I know that the divine will make sure that that person finds this video at the perfect time, at the perfect place for whatever circumstance it is that they have in their life. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. It's not my job to worry about all of that other nonsense. But you have to be in this place of centeredness to be there where you don't care about all that other nonsense. And furthermore, all that other nonsense, that is just the ego trying to keep you small. So why would I give any energy or give any credence to my ego? My ego has a very specific purpose. I know its purpose and its place in my existence. And I now, instead of the ego using me, I know now how to use my ego. I know how to put my ego in its place now. And I know how to be the master of my brain. Now that I am the awareness and I am focusing my awareness, I now command my ego. I put my ego in pause. It's like, oh, thank you for being there for contrast. We're going to put you away now. And brain, I am your master. You are my servant. You do as I say. Not the other way around. That's how it used to be. That's the old me. The new me, no. I know who I am. I know that I am perfect unconditional love. That's the state of being that I choose to be in and that I choose to embrace because that's where all my power lies. And that's what this work is all about. So yet far too often, most of us change only when we are faced with a crisis, trauma, or discouraging diagnosis of some sort. That crisis commonly comes in the form of a challenge, which may be physical, an accident, say, or an illness, emotional, the loss of someone we love. For example, spiritual, for instance, an accumulation of setbacks that has us questioning our worth and how the universe operates, or financial, a job loss, perhaps. Note that all of the above are about losing something. Why wait for trauma or loss to occur and have your ego get knocked off balance due to that negative emotional state? Clearly, when a calamity befalls you, you have to act. You can't take care of business as usual when you've been knocked, as the expression goes, knocked to your knees. At those critical moments when we've really, really grown tired of being beaten down by circumstances, we'll say, this can't go on. I don't care what it takes or how I feel the body. I don't care how long it takes time, no matter what's going on in my life environment. I'm going to change. I have to. So now, regardless of conditions, you have decided to put your hands on the steering wheel and say, I have to change. I'm going to change. I don't care what it takes, but I'm going to do this. Period. Lock, stock, and barrel. And that is the beginning, my friends and gems, to the rest of your awesome life. So we can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or we can do so in a state of joy and inspiration. We don't have to wait until we are so uncomfortable that we feel forced to move out of our resting state. So side effects of closing that gap. As you know, one of the key skills you need to develop is self-awareness, self-observation. That's a short definition of what I mean when I talk about meditation in the next chapter. In meditation, you're going to look at the negative emotional state that has had such an impact on your life. You're going to recognize the primary state of your personality that drives your thoughts and behaviors so that you become intimately familiar with every nuance of them. Over time, you're going to use those powers of observation to help you unmemorize that negative emotional state. And by doing so, you will surrender that emotion to a greater mind, closing the gap between who you are and who you have presented to the world in the past. Picture yourself standing in a room with arms outstretched, pushing the opposite walls apart. Do you have any idea how much energy you would consume if you were trying to keep those walls from crushing you? Instead of doing that, what if you released those two walls, took a couple of steps forward? After all, that gap is kind of like a door, isn't it? And walked out of that room and into a completely new one. What about the other room you left behind? Well, the walls have come together in such a way that you can't even get back inside it. That gap has closed, and that separate parts of you have become unified. And what's going to happen to all that energy you are expending? Physics states that energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred or transformed. That's exactly what's going to happen to you when you get to the point that no thought, no emotion, no subconscious behavior goes unnoticed. You can think of this another way. You'll be going into the operating system of the subconscious and bringing all that data and those instructions to your conscious awareness to truly see where those urges and proclivities that have taken control of your life are located. So again, you'll be going into the operating system of the subconscious and bringing all of that data and those instructions into your conscious awareness to truly see where those urges and proclivities that have taken control of your life are located. You become conscious of your unconscious self. When we break the chains of that bond, we liberate the body. It is no longer the mind living in the same past day after day. When we liberate the body emotionally, we close the gap. And when we close the gap, we release the energy that was once used to produce it. With that energy, we now have the raw material we can use to create a new life. So in figure 7E, as you unmemorize any emotion that has become part of your identity, you close the gap between how you appear and who you really are. The side effect of this phenomena is the release of energy in the form of stored emotion in the body. Once the mind of that emotion is liberated from the body, energy is freed up into the quantum field for you to use as a creator. So another side effect of breaking the bonds of your emotional addictions is that this release of energy is like a healthy shot of some wonderful elixir. Not only are you energized, but you feel something you likely haven't felt in quite a while. Joy. When you liberate the body from the chains of emotional dependency, you will feel uplifted and inspired. Have you ever taken a long car trip? When you get out of your vehicle and finally stretch a bit and breathe fresh air, and the sound of the car's tires on the pavement or the heater's fan of the air conditioner whir falls silent, that's a great feeling. Imagine how much better those new sensations would feel if you'd been locked in the trunk for 2,000 miles. For a lot of us, that's exactly how we've been feeling for a significant stretch of time. So keep in mind that it's not enough merely to notice how you've been thinking, feeling, and behaving. Meditation requires you to be more active than that. You'll also have to tell the truth about yourself. You have to come clean and reveal what you've been hiding in the shadow part of that gap. You have to drag those things out into the bright light of day. And when you really see what you've been doing to yourself, you have to look at that mess and say, this is no longer serving my best interests. This is no longer serving me. This has never been loving to myself. Then you can make a decision to be free. I'm going to stop right here. If you take a look at one of the interviews that I did just a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview with Alexandra Cousins, and she talks about how in the midst of all this illness, and it's debilitating illness where she was not able to function any longer and dealing with so many physicians, she realized during the meditations that she had a death wish on herself over the different circumstances that she had lived in her life. She was actually all of a sudden in this awareness, oh my gosh, I have a death wish on myself. No wonder her body was breaking down. If you saw her now, oh my gosh, I mean, she's so youthful looking. It's hard to believe that someone like her was so ill, and she's so beautiful, so healthy looking now. And perhaps maybe you might want to listen to that story, and maybe there's parts of you that will relate with her. So from victimization to unexpected abundance, how can one woman close the gap? How one woman closed the gap. So one person who reaped the rewards of facing her life with the courage of a quantum observer is Pamela, a participant in one of my seminars. Pamela struggles financially because for 2 years, her unemployed ex-husband hadn't paid the mandated child support. Frustrated, angry, and feeling victimized, she even reacted negatively to unrelated situations. The meditation we did that day was about how the end product of any experience is an emotion. So because so many of our experiences involve family and friends, we share the resultant emotions with them. And that's usually a good thing. Bonds relate to places we've been, things we've done, even objects we've shared can strengthen our connection with people. But the flip side is that we also share the emotions associated with negative experiences. So we bond energetically with one another in a place beyond time and space because we are entangled with others, to use quantum terms, and frequently bond through survival oriented emotions. It is almost impossible for us to change when we are still connected by negative experiences and emotions. Thus, reality stays the same. So in Pamela's case, her ex-husband's anxiety, guilt, and feelings of inferiority about not being able to support his children were interwoven into the fabric of her state of being, along with her own emotions of victimization, resentment, and lack. Whatever the opportunity knocked, her victimhood reared its ugly head and produced an undesirable outcome. Her destructive emotions and the energy associated with them had virtually frozen her in a stagnant state of thinking, doing, and being. So no matter what she did to try to change this situation, she and her ex-husband were bonded together by their mutual negative experiences, emotions, and energies. And thus, none of her efforts changed her circumstances with him. The workshop helped Pamela realize that she had to break this bond. She had to let go of the emotions that defined her in her present reality. She also learned how a cycle of thinking and feeling and acting in the same way for years could produce a cascade effect that might trigger genes for disease. And she didn't want that to happen. Something had to give. So I like that phrase because, as Pamela told me afterward during the meditation, she recognized the injurious emotions that had her victimization had set in motion impatience with her kids. Ooh. So she recognized the injurious emotions that her victimization had set in motion impatience with her kids, complaining and blaming and feelings of desperation and lack. Imagine that. Unbeknownst to her, she's passing down the emotions of desperation and lack to her children, which, had she been conscious, she probably would have stopped this far sooner. But she didn't know any better. So she continued to pass on these emotions of desperation and lack to her kids now. So she let go of those emotions associated with past experiences, simultaneously releasing her self involved state of being and gave them up to the greater mind. In doing so, Pamela released all of that frozen energy into quantum field, closing that gap between who she thought she was and who she presented to the world. She did this so well, she started to feel so overjoyed and grateful that she wanted abundance for everyone, not just for herself. So she moved from selfish emotions to selfless emotions. She got up from that meditation, a different person from who she was before it. Pamela's energy release signaled the field to begin organizing outcomes that were just right for the new self she was in the process of becoming. Almost immediately, she received evidence of this in two forms. The first involved her internet business. When she had previously tried a promotion, she fretted about the response to it, constantly checking her website, and saw only mediocre results. She initiated her second promotion the morning of the workshop, but was too busy to think about the results during the day. That evening, she was feeling the positive effects of having let go of the past. She felt even better when she discovered that she had earned nearly $10,000 that day from the promotion she'd run. Pamela received the second piece of evidence 3 days later when her caseworker called to report that her ex had sent a check, not just for that month, but for the full $12,000 in back support payments that he owed. She was beyond pleased to have made. So she was beyond pleased to have made nearly $22,000 after doing that meditation. She did nothing in the physical realm to bring about those results and couldn't have predicted how that money would find its way to her. But she was enormously grateful that it had. What Pamela's story illustrates is the power of letting go of negative emotions. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and gems, did you hear that? What Pamela's story illustrates is the power of letting go of negative emotions. How many of you have to let go of negative emotions to let true love come in? How many of you have to let go of negative emotions to let true prosperity come in? How many of you have to let go of negative emotions to let true health come in? And so forth and so forth. Let go of those negative emotions so that your truth can come to you. When we are mired in our time-worn mindset and habitual behaviors and perceptions, there's no way for us to find solutions to problems rooted in the past. And those problems, experiences really, produce powerful, energetic emotions. So once we relinquish these, we experience an enormous release of energy, and reality magically rearranges itself. So by moving out of the past, we can set our sights on the future. It's 11:33 here. I think I'm going to call this a pause. Yeah. Tomorrow we will continue with part 2 of this chapter. We're going to wrap it up here because it's 11:33 p.m. We started at 9. It's 2.5 hours. So this is going to be a long video to render and to edit. But thank you for tuning in, tapping in, turning on to Love and Money Secrets TV. Oh, by the way, you realize, I think I mentioned this before in one of the earlier broadcasts, this, which happens to be obviously a position that many people do in religious places, but this actually goes through your heartline meridian. it actually is something that is of benefit to your heart, especially as you practice heart-centered meditations. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And that's why I'm doing this right now, not only because I'm thankful that you're here, but also to point out to you that this is just another little gem that I wanted to share with you. Whenever I can, I try to share things that work for me that possibly will work for you too. So tomorrow we'll go on with part 2 of this chapter. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to put a comment in the comments below. I make sure to read all the comments and get back to everybody who makes a comment. And let's use this as an open forum, as a classroom. And I'll do my best to get whatever answers to you and to respond to you so that you can move forward in this journey. So thank you for tuning in. Ciao for now. I'm a little turned around, so ciao for now.